I've got a great guest today. Her name is Vanessa Woods, author. We'll be talking to her about her new book, Bonobo Handshake, a memoir of love and adventure in the Congo from Gotham Books, a division of Penguin Group. Now, Vanessa Woods is a research scientist, an internationally published author and journalist. She's the main Australian and New Zealand feature writer for Discovery Channel, and her work has appeared in several publications, including, among others, BBC Wildlife. She's also the author of the memoir, It's Every Monkey for Themselves, published in Australia. Vanessa Woods currently lives in North Carolina with her husband, where she works at Duke University. Vanessa, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, I'm very excited about having you on. I know you are on a book tour, and so I appreciate your taking time to talk about this charming yet sad book, Bonobo Handshake. I think
thank you for having bonobos on the show.
Oh, well, you're very welcome. Now, I want to tell my audience also that you're part of the Humanoid Psychology Research Group, which compares the psychology of humans, chimpanzees, and bonobos. But the work is not dry research, and your current book is filled with love, sex, death, sadness, joy, and close relationships. All of that within the Bonobo orphans.
But, yes, all the main themes in life. I try to squeeze them all in there.
That's right. Before we get into the story itself, I'd like you to define for my audience the difference between chimps and bonobos. But I also want to say first, this is not, my listeners, this is not going to be a dry discussion. This is an amazing story, and I want you to stick with it so that you can hear what is going on and what we can do to help. So let's start then, Vanessa, with the difference between chimps and bonobos.
Okay, so humans have two closest living relatives. They share 98.7% of our DNA. And the first relative is something that everybody knows about. It's the chimpanzee. And, you know, what a fascinating animal to compare ourselves to because, you know, they have the light side of humanity. So they love, they grieve, you know, they have these incredibly complex political systems, but they also share the dark side of ourselves. So they have hunting, they have war, they occasionally torture and kill each other, they beat their females, you know, kill their infants. So, you know, chimpanzees has just been the model for us for 40 years because in a lot of ways it's like looking into a mirror image. And so we have these other closest living relatives who've kind of been locked in the closet and who nobody's ever heard of. And in fact, we just did a study at Duke University and only 25% of people even know that the bonobos are a great ape.
Absolutely.
So they are a very, very different creature to the chimpanzee. While chimpanzees are male-dominated, bonobos are female-dominated. And so having females in charge of the group, I'm sure you agree, Jacqueline, that it tends to be better for everybody when females are in charge.
It sure does seem that way. Now, you're saying bonobos. Is that your accent, or is that the proper way to say it?
Oh, you can do it. I thought the way you said bonobo was charming, and the English tend to use it that way, so it just makes you sound exotic. I think most Americans say bonobo, so I've adapted myself to that.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, why don't we begin with a brief overview of the story?
So in 2005, I fell in love with this lantern boy from the South, and he asked me to go to Congo with him to study this rare ape. And just like most people, I'd never heard of bonobos before. I'd mostly worked with chimpanzees, and wow, did bonobos just rock my world. And, you know, I started off as a big chimpanzee fan like most people, but the more I learned about bonobos and what they could tell us, the more I just became really drawn into their society and the way they operate and just the lessons they have to teach us. I just think are really extraordinary.
So your story is about many things, and as you said, it's your own personal love. And it's the love that exists among this charming and wonderful, but also a group that is probably on the verge of extinction if something isn't done about it. So, to me, just the introduction to the book was one of the most difficult for me to read in terms of the horrible cruelty and loss of life among both humans and the bonobos. But it also does tell of the wonderful characteristics of them and the bravery and love of the people working to save them. Could you give some statistics as to the number of bonobos that existed when you first went to the Congo, where they are, and the main reason why they have decreased in numbers?
Sure. So the truth is that nobody knows how many bonobos there are exactly. They live in a jungle that's 3 times the size of France, and the Congo has suffered this terrible war that the number is up to 5.4 million people dead. So this is the bloodiest war since World War II. And so, as an animal, if you had to pick a country to live in, Congo would probably not be it. And so, unfortunately, the Congolese, they eat bonobo meat, and they don't have a lot of agriculture, so no cows, sheep, and many other domesticated animals. So most of the protein they need, they get from the forest. And unfortunately, bonobos are a prime target for hunters because you can kill them with one bullet, and when you've found one, you've usually found 30 that you can kill at the same time because they live in the community. And so we work at an orphanage called Lola Ya Bonobo. And when these orphans are captured and try to be sold, then, sometimes they're lucky and the police find them and confiscate them, but then, they just can't throw them back into the wild. And so they take them to Lola Ya Bonobo, where they can grow up with other orphans and where human mothers take care of them for at least, the first couple of months.
Right. Well, I lived in Belgium from 86 to 90, and of course the Congo, once owned by Belgium, was called the Belgian Congo, and basically it was the playground of Belgium's King Leopold. And I visited the African Museum in Tervuren, where the bonobos were discovered, a fact that you do mention in the book. It was also the repository for many of the treasures that he had brought back to Belgium. And it struck me when I read your book, because I didn't realize what had happened. But while I was there, I attended Leuven University, where one of my classes was filled with students from the Congo who all suddenly disappeared one day without explanation. And so I guess they were all called back home, and probably most of them were dead pretty much after that.
Wow.
So can you talk a little bit more about the reasons for this tragic war that has been going on for so long?
Well, sometimes I hear it get called a civil war, and it wasn't at all. This was an international war. So Congo's greatest fortune is, unfortunately, also her greatest blight. So it is a country with incredible resources. It has a third of the world's diamonds, half of the world's cobalt, and most crucially, it has 70% of the world's coltan. Coltan is a mineral that we all possess. Probably everyone listening to your show has got coltan from Congo, either in their laptops, their mobile phones, or other electronic equipment. And so what happened was, in 2000, the price of coltan jumped from $30 a pound to $380 a pound. So this was this was huge. And so all the Western countries, including America and unfortunately Australia, were just determined to get this mineral out. And there was a huge war fought for many different reasons, but one of the reasons why it was fueled and funded was from the Western world, who was, funding these rebels and, government soldiers and all these different sort of armies to go in and plunder Congo's resources and then get it out and bring it over.
Well, that was the other thing that was a surprise to me, because of course, I don't follow, the resources of a country, basically. But coltan, I had never heard of that before. That doesn't mean anything because I'm not a techie. But I'm just wondering how much of that aspect of it people really know.
I think it was suppressed. I think it was very deliberately suppressed, and that's why not many people had heard of the Congo War or what was going on in it. And in fact, America has a very close relationship with Rwanda, and the terrible genocide in Rwanda was actually what sparked the Congo War. And, Bill Clinton sort of went public saying, oh, what a terrible thing. I wish I'd known about it. I wish I could have done something. When, in fact, there were these CIA reports uncovered in 2004 that showed that Clinton and Madeleine Albright and Al Gore, they knew exactly when the genocide started, and they did nothing, and they purposefully ignored it. And so, after that, there was kind of, this sort of feeling of indebtedness towards Rwanda because they'd let this massacre happen. And so the U.S. had been very supportive of Rwanda, and so when Rwanda's coltan exports jumped to $20 million a month, they were praising Rwanda as this example of, oh, look what African countries can do after this terrible thing, when they knew full well that Rwanda has no coltan. They were getting it all from Congo, and the rebel army from Rwanda was in Congo getting all the coltan out, and then they were selling this directly to American and European countries.
Well, let's get back to talking about your work. You began your work with Chimps in Uganda, where, as I recall, that's where you met your scientist, now husband, Brian.
Yes.
Hare, is that Hare?
Yes, that's right, like the bunny rabbit.
Like the bunny rabbit. And you ended up together in the Congo. I was struck by the conditions that you found when you first arrived at the airport in the Congo. Could you describe a little bit about that, about your when you got there?
So the Kinshasa airport is notorious. It's one of the most dangerous airports in the world, or it was when we started going there in 2005. And basically you have to hire a bodyguard the size of a house to bribe you through customs, and even then it doesn't always work, and we actually ended up stealing our bags from the customs officials and running out of the airport. There was these guards with like AK-47s, but I guess the reason why we were there was just so important, and that was to study bonobos, and bonobos, you can't find them anywhere else. So if the bonobos had been somewhere nice in the Mediterranean, that would have been great, but we really had to go to Congo to find them, and this sanctuary is really the only place in the world that we can do the kind of psychological research that we need to do.
And that's the heart of the story, the work that you and Brian did at the refuge called Lola Ya Bonobo. Describe the sanctuary and exactly where it is located in the Congo.
It is just outside of Kinshasa, which is the capital of Congo, and it is absolutely beautiful. It is the last, I first had the thought of writing Bonobo Handshake when I was there, because I was like, who would believe after this heinous airport experience that you could come to such a paradise? And that's what Lola Ya Bonobo means. It means the paradise of bonobos, and it was started by this extraordinary Belgian woman called Claudine Andre, who has lived now in the Congo for over 60 years. So it's just gorgeous. It has these lakes and these lilies and these beautiful houses, because the forest is there. It's one of the only forests left in Kinshasa, and it used to be the weekend retreat of the former dictator Mobutu Sese Seko. He ruled the Congo for 4 decades and stole something like $4 billion before he died. So you can imagine that this was a pretty nice place for him to get away to.
Oh, I'm sure it was. And I want to tell my listeners that are just tuning in that I'm talking to writer Vanessa Woods about her new book, Bonobo Handshake, a memoir of love and adventure in the Congo from Gotham Books. Now, you describe the sanctuary and where it's located, and you do talk a little bit. You did mention the gal that we're going to touch on a little further. But I'd like you to, at this point, give my listeners your website, because I was quite disappointed that there weren't any photographs in the book, and your website is loaded with photographs. I wanted to see more of this charming creature. So could you give that website?
Did you not get the final book? Because the final book actually does. It has 8 pages of photographs.
Oh, no.
I think you read it a while. You got the initial gallery. They gave it to you before they even put the book together.
Well, I am so glad to hear that. Yeah, I got the pre-release copy, and I'm saying, where are all the pictures of this wonderful creature?
Someone should send you one. Someone should send you the final one. Yes, there are 8 pages, the color photos of the bonobos in there, but certainly on the website, which is just the title of the book, bonobohandshake.com, I have photos and videos, so I think it's really fun that, after people read the book, then they can then go to the website and see the bonobos, in photographs and playing around in the forest.
Why don't we now talk about, first of all, why the need for a sanctuary for these wonderful, wonderful creatures?
So as I said, bonobo is quite a prized meat for hunters, and when they kill a bonobo community, there's usually an infant or two clinging on to their dead mothers, and so the hunters take these infants to sell them as pets on the black market. And actually, one of the bonobos at the sanctuary was found in someone's baggage on the way to Paris. No, on the way to Moscow in the Charles de Gaulle airport. So they'd smuggled her out of Congo already. So when they get confiscated, as they sometimes do, they need somewhere to go. You can't just throw them back into the wild. They have no mother, no family. So they take them to this beautiful sanctuary called Lola Ya Bonobo, where they can grow up with other orphans.
I also want to mention, too, certainly there's so much in this book, but I want to mention the other thing that just shocked me, and that is the fact that these creatures are often taken, and parts of their bodies are cut off of them and sold because it's considered what? Why did the locals do that?
Well, because bonobos look so human, they're so they look so similar to us. Bonobo parts are very useful in black magic. So sometimes they arrive in the sanctuary in terrible conditions. They've had parts of their fingers cut off, sometimes bits of their genitals, and they're extremely traumatized. They're just like traumatized children. They rock, they cry, they shake sometimes. So it takes, for some of them, it's a really long road to recovery.
I'm sure it is. Talk about Claudine Andre, the woman who founded the sanctuary, just briefly.
She's wonderful. In France, they call her the angel of bonobos, and she really is. She has dedicated, over a decade to rehabilitating these animals. And actually, last year, they had the world's first bonobo release, so the very first release of bonobos back into the wild.
Oh, my. Is there, and now you talk about the size of the area in which they live, so is there any way for the volunteers and scientists to follow up how they're doing when they are released?
Yes, no, they're completely monitored, and actually Duke University is helping with the monitoring of these released bonobos and tracking them through the forest every day. So we're very well, we know where they are, they're followed by people, we know what they're doing, we get photographs, it's all on the blog, which is on my website. So yeah, this is a good thing.
And what led her to create this sanctuary? Her love for the animal?
Well, one day she was working at the Kinshasa Zoo, and this small bonobo was brought in, and the zoo director said, "Oh, look, don't bother, Claudine. They all die. Like, we've had bonobos before, and they lose their mothers, and then they just give up." But she took this bonobo and she nursed him back to health, and then as soon as people heard that she'd had success with this bonobo, then they brought other bonobos, found their way to her, and then eventually she needed somewhere to put them, so she created Lola Ya Bonobo.
And she's quite a brave woman. She has gone face to face with some in that country that wanted her out of there or wanted to get at the sanctuary. And
yes. She stayed through 2 wars. Every other white person in their right mind fled the country, but she had 12 baby bonobos in her garage. So where could she go? She stayed with them.
This would be a good place to ask, and of course, having read the book, I know and understand, and even if I hadn't read the book, I would care about the diminishing numbers of this wonderful, wonderful creature. But this would be a good place to ask you why we should care about their diminishing numbers.
Right. So, people sometimes say, what is it about bonobos? Hardly anyone even knows that they exist. I mean, why should we care about them more than, like, say, the polar bears or the grizzly bears or, elephants? And it's just, of course we should care about all animals that are disappearing, but this is why bonobos are important. So when I wake up in the morning, I know that someone might kill me. We have murder is illegal in the U.S. and still, between 15 to 20,000 people are murdered every year. And when a chimpanzee wakes up in the morning, they also know that someone might kill them because, as a male chimpanzee, you're more likely to be killed by another chimpanzee than by anything else. And when bonobos wake up in the morning, they don't have this. And this is why they are important. Because for all our things, for all our technology, we just made that supersonic jet that just hit Mach 6. And yet for all that, we know cognitively that we need to live together and live in peace, and yet we can't. And we haven't been able to. There has been 26 days of peace, since World War II. And there are 7 conflicts going on right now that kill over 1,000 people a year. Women in America and abroad, they suffer from extreme violence from men, and bonobos, they don't have any of that.
No,
and
they're
so
peaceful.
Closely related. Exactly, they're very peaceful, and we need to find out what it is about them.
And I think it's important to mention again too that they do share 98.7% of our DNA. And so I think it would be important to find out what is it about them that has created this peaceful creature.
Well, they do use sex as a mechanism, and as humans, this is not going to be our mechanism, but we need to study them to find out more and find out how it is that we can also be, I guess, more bonobo-like and live in a society without violence.
Absolutely. And that goes without saying that certainly we're sorry that people have to live off of the wild as the locals do in Congo, but also, and they're living through horrible situations. So, but there's nothing we can do about that individually, where there is something that we can do to help. What about people that might be interested in learning more about how they can help the Bonobo and the sanctuary? There's a separate website, is there not?
Yes, there's a separate website. It's very easy to remember. It's friendsofbonobos.org. People can go there. They can sponsor a bonobo from the sanctuary. They can donate as much as they can afford. It's fully tax deductible. So I'd encourage everyone to go to friendsofbonobos.org.
I want to mention that you and your husband are continuing your work at the sanctuary also. Now, I know you're with Duke University. How often do you return to the sanctuary?
So we go once or twice a year for between 2 and 4 months. So we go back every year, which is really fun because we can see these bonobos grow up. And, it's just so crucial for us in understanding exactly what I said before. Why is it that bonobos are so cooperative? Why are they so peaceful? Why, are they so altruistic in some way? So these are really exciting questions that we're looking at.
And again, for those of you that have just tuned in, I'm talking to Vanessa Woods about her new book, Bonobo Handshake, a memoir of love and adventure in the Congo from Gotham Books. And you are on a tour now. How many cities are you visiting on this tour?
I think I'm visiting 8 cities on the East Coast right now. I'll be on the West Coast. It's all on my website, bonobohandshake.com. So check. I would love to see people at my book talk. So go to the website and see if I'm coming to a city near you.
And I'm sorry that you're not going to be in L.A. You are going to be in San Francisco, but we do have people here that live all over the country and all over the state, and maybe there's someone here from San Francisco that can see you when you're there. Certainly, the story of the Bonobo Melu charmed me as it did you, and she was described as a graceful ballerina-like creature, and her love for your husband, along with her reactions toward you, were amazing. I'd like you to tell that story.
Such a little witch. Bonobos have these funny thing. They choose you. I've worked with dozens of chimpanzees, and they really seem to like one person as much as the other. But bonobos, they see you, and it's instantaneous. They choose you, and you are their person now. And Malu did this to my husband, and so as soon as she figured out that I was his woman, she started torturing me. She would she would kick me in the shins, and she would bungee jump off my hair, and she would just generally torment me. I never done anything to her. And then I looked to my husband to defend me, from this little harridan that was attacking me, and he would just be like, "Oh my Lou, she's so gorgeous. I love her so much." It was a little sickening, actually.
Well, I loved the description also of how she would leap off of something without fear and just. I think she did that a couple of times, didn't she, and land in your husband's arms? And
this is something very, very special about bonobos. So I raised an orphaned chimpanzee once upon a time at a sanctuary, and you play this game with them just like you play with kids, where you throw them up in the air as high as you can, and then you catch them on the way down. So the difference with my chimpanzee and Malu was that my chimpanzee, he always caught me on the way down. As he fell, he made sure he hung on to me. just in case, I guess I dropped him. But when Brian threw Malou, he threw her so high in the air. He threw her as high as he can, and she just went completely limp. And if he had dropped her, she would have cracked her head open. But she didn't. She trusted him. She trusted him completely with her everything, with her all. And so she knew that no matter what, he would catch her as she fell. And it was very special.
Absolutely. And you have a daughter now, and what is her name?
Oh, no, actually, no daughters, just bonobos.
Oh, no daughters. Oh, okay.
It was something. I said that if I had a daughter, I would call her Malou.
Okay.
And I'll keep you tuned on those developments.
Oh, okay, fine. The book is dedicated to Malou, though, is it not?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Again, mention the website one more time.
Bonobo Handshake, the title of the book.com. So it's just bonobohandshake.com.
Well, people are going to have to read the book to learn what a bonobo handshake is.
I'm glad you know what one is. Yes, the bonobo handshake is not the traditional handshake.
No, it's not. And I thought when I read it, I'd fall off the chair laughing when I read the description as to what it was. And I described it to my local person here who's manning all of the controls, and he got quite a kick out of that. Well, what's next for you?
So just more bonobo studies. As I said, we haven't been studying bonobos very long, and now that there's relative peace in Congo, it's just such a fantastic opportunity to find out what bonobos can tell us about ourselves. And I'm working really hard to try and work with Claudine Andre and Friends of Bonobos to do all we can to save bonobos, because if they disappear, then we'll never understand ourselves.
Are you working on another book as well?
Not at the moment. I'm just flat out promoting this one at the moment.
Yeah, sure.
I've just got bonobos. That's what I eat, sleep, and drink at the moment.
Well, that's not a bad thing to do, because they are so terrific. Now, how long is this book tour going to last before you head back to North Carolina, where your home is?
July. I should be back home in July.
Well, that'll be terrific. Anything else you would like to add to what we've already talked about? Something I didn't want to give too much away in the book because I don't want to spoil it for people, but is there something else you would like to add before we have to say goodbye quickly?
Well, I think that people are always asking me what they can do for bonobos, and of course you can go to friendsofbonobos.org, but what everyone can do, like right now and just today, that would just be so wonderful, is go and tell someone else about bonobo, what a bonobo is, how wonderful they are, because I think in saving them, the first obstacle we have is that nobody even knows they exist. So everyone, I ask you just to go out and just tell someone about bonobos. Look up the Bonobo Handshake on the website so you can pass that on, not to children.
Right.
So that would just be wonderful.
Now, let me ask you quickly, the Bonobo Handshake, is that something that just evolved on the part of the animal itself?
Wow, you're getting into territory where I have to kind of dodge what the Bonobo Handshake really is.
I know, we do. We have to dodge it, that's for sure. But yes, this is something very special that only bonobos do. Not everybody does it, so I think it is just part of their society. It's something the ladies came up with, and I think that a lot of girls would agree it's definitely the way forward. It would be a strange way for us to say hello to somebody.
It would be a strange way for us to say hello, but who knows? Maybe that's
the way to go.
Maybe we just cut it off right there.
Well, also, I do want to talk about the mothers. You called them the mothers, and these are women that have gone through horrible things in their own lives in living in the Congo, and these are gals that do take care of the animals. And can you just add something very quickly about them?
Oh, the mamas! They are wonderful women, and something that has really really captures my attention is
very quickly. I'm afraid we're going to have to say goodbye. So
sure, they are just the bonobos wouldn't survive without them, and these four women are just my heroes. I adore all of them. So read the book and find out everything else.